Good evening. We still have some people coming on in. Feel free to come on in. You can walk in front. It's okay. I'm Sarah Hansen. I'm one of the post-secondary counselors here at Stevenson High School. I'm alone tonight, which I think this is the first time in Stevenson's history I've been up here presenting alone. So hopefully you won't get too tired of my voice. I'll try to make some bad jokes along the way. For those of you that are Zooming in, we always know we have a strong Zoom presence. Please know the person manning the Zoom in the back is not really there to answer Q&A. She'll probably drop some links in there. All of our slides will be online at our CCC's website, usually within a week, though we tell you that, and John Dazan is amazing. We usually have it up within 1 to 2 days, and the recording as well. So just know if I go fast for you tonight, or there's things that you want to go back and look at, all of it is going to be online. Those of you in the audience, we are starting to really love presenting in here because it feels like I have a packed house, which I haven't felt since before COVID. And the PAC, it would look like nobody. So it feels like I got a packed house tonight, which is great. Hopefully you got the 2 handouts as you walked in, the senior timeline, which has all the major events and things going on this year, plus our workshops that we'll talk about. And in addition, the Common App tip sheet, which is really more for your students, but I know that they're going to ask you for help along the way. And it has all those pesky questions that you don't know how to answer and help students walk through that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you want to check your phones in the audience to make sure you guys are in silence, at some point we'll have somebody's phone going off and chuckle about it, but it's great. So, oh, and this Canvas page, all of your seniors were told to register for this. They all got this presentation literally the 4th or 5th day of school. It seems so early. First week we pulled them in and said, okay, let's talk about life after Stevenson. But there's 2 of us in this role, and we always get so many great individual questions, so we wanted to get it out to them. This Canvas page is like their one-stop shop to everything. All of our tip sheets, our handouts, our workshops, how to make appointments, everything is in that place, how to register for college rep visits. So, you know, if they get stuck a little bit, just encourage them to go into that Canvas app and look at our CCC page. So Mr. Miller and I are the 2 post-secondary counselors here. This is kind of our night 3 of 3 we talked about last year. We met with you guys twice throughout the year. Mr. Miller is home on an amazing leave with a new baby. He will be back in just a few short weeks. Mr. Yurkan is subbing for him and was just for a little bit in May and over June. Some of you might have met with him. He was the post-secondary counselor for many, many years at Rolling Meadows. He helped train me when I worked at a different high school. He's a wonderful resource. So don't be afraid to reach out to him, but he lives in the city, so we gave him the night off, and I said, that's okay, we'll see you tomorrow morning. And then Mr. Miller will be back soon, and he works with the counselors on the west side. I work with the counselors on the east side. We have our caseloads. So these are our goals for tonight. In particular, we're going to kind of just briefly do the overview of options of life after Stevenson and how we help students on any of those journeys and pathways. But we usually go pretty deep in the 4-year college app process. We know, I think last year's class, 85% of our students headed off to a 4-year college, and 12%, I think it was, headed off to a 2-year college, with many of them also still applying to 4-year. So that is the goal tonight, is how to get through this process and survive. And then we'll talk about the overall calendar as well. Okay, so first we always want to make sure that our students that are looking at enlisting kind of have a good idea of that information. We do a military week every year. We've pushed it into April this year, where all of direct enlistment branches, the reserves, the National Guard, they will all be here talking about their different facets. They also usually do a great overview of all the different pieces of the military to understand what enlistment versus reserve, National Guard, Air Force, all of those look like. And then we also will host the ASVAB. The ASVAB is the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. It's a mouthful to say, but it is a requirement for the military. It's like a career assessment and helps students kind of figure out where they might be best suited military-wise. That's hosted during a late arrival, so students can sign up and take that with us. And they also can take it on their own through any of the recruitment offices. For many students, sometimes they are a little hesitant on heading off and don't necessarily want a lot more formal education. So we definitely highlight an evening where there's opportunities for careers that are little to no formal education after high school. So these would be career pathways that might be an associate's degree at the max, certificate program, or direct entry apprenticeships. We kind of coined this night the Career Ready Trade and now Military Expo, because we've invited the military to come as well. And we open up to all of Lake County. It's a great evening to come. We actually host this starting 8th period, so seniors can kind of mill around if they want on their own. And it goes to about 6 p.m. so parents can come in. And I think, I graduated back in the 90s, and we always think of trades in one certain way. We think of, electricians and plumbing and welding and HVAC, which are all wonderful, great, lucrative careers. But this expands more than just that. This is also culinary arts and cosmetology and phlebotomy and, vet tech and real estate agent, and the list goes on and on. So it is a great evening if one of your students are kind of considering that pathway for you to come in as well with them and kind of explore those options. And that's going to be Wednesday, March 5th. And again, starts 8th period and goes to about 6 o'clock at night. And that's on that senior timeline that you guys grabbed as you came in. We do have a career resource specialist. We are transitioning. Many of your students maybe met with Ms. Travis last year, who's moved on as a counselor. So Ms. Bloomfield, who's actually our registrar, is transitioning into that role in the next few weeks. So we will have career talks just like we did last year, some opportunities for maybe some shadowing or field trips. So if your students still need some exploration, know that that's going to be an option still this year as well. And Ms. Bloomfield will be in the College Career Center as well. This is a slide that I've put up for our students and for our parents. When I was in high school, I'm first gen. My parents didn't go to college. They weren't able to, and I was the first in the family to go. And I remember sitting in an audience listening to people talk about bachelor's degrees and master's and undergraduate, and I didn't understand what all those terms were until I finally raised my hand and I said, I don't understand what the difference between these are. And someone was kind enough to actually sit down and explain it to me so I knew the language. So we want to make sure that every student and every family kind of understand the languages that we talk about with this. So post-secondary, secondary is education, high school, right? Primary would be elementary. Post-secondary, my role, life after high school. So anything in yellow is the community, or is considered undergraduate, and that's that community college that we talked about that could be certificate programs or 12 to 15 months in nature, limited gen eds, 2-year degrees, which are the associate's degrees. And our community colleges in the US work really closely with our undergraduate institutions or our 4-year bachelor degrees. So you could transfer and do 2 more years at a 4-year school to get that undergraduate bachelor degree. And then everything in gray is graduate. So that's kind of beyond that bachelor's education, that undergraduate education. Community college, we definitely promote as well as options. Last year we had 100 students that attended College of Lake County. It's our second most popular college where we send students. Anybody know what number 1 is? University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, we're number 1. I think we're their number 1 feeder and they're our number 1 feeder, or sender, I should say. But CLC is number 2. It's about 100 students last year. And then we also send about 20 students from last year's class to Harper. Harper Community College, for some of our students, make more sense if they're looking at a community college, especially for our students that maybe live in southern Buffalo Grove or Long Grove area. Harper's in Palatine, but we're considered out of district for Harper. And so usually the rates are triple, but Harper does have an agreement that if your student works part-time, 10 hours a week anywhere in their boundaries, so just south of Lake Cook Road, they would give them in district rates. So for some of our students, Harper makes more logistical sense. We do a lot of work with CLC because they are in district and they're the ones that connect. We bring College of Lake County and Harper both here. We'll do field trips to both of them as well. But for CLC in particular, we will offer on-site placement exams so they can take their math and English placement exams here with us during the school day with our CLC rep, who does come monthly. And then we also can register for them classes. During the school day, they can sit down with the rep and register versus having to go up and do an appointment. And we'll also help them with the application in February and sending transcripts and test scores. We told your students that if they are thinking about a community college at all, to make sure they email either their post-secondary counselor or their counselor. We have a list that we keep the names of students that are interested, so we make sure we email them and reach out specifically about these opportunities that come up. So make sure you have your counselor or your student email their counselor or post-secondary counselor if that's something you're considering. For some of our students, they keep a foot in both worlds. We definitely see that where they maybe, are looking at four-year schools, but also continue to keep the CLC thing in the side going. They don't have to make a decision until May 1st. I've even had students register for classes at CLC, but not pay for them and hold them. So they have those great spots at those classes that are maybe not at 8 a.m. And then just make their decision they get closer to May 1st. Our community college week is February 9th, but we have a lot of other opportunities with our CLC rep coming in monthly. College visits. So our first one started today. We had Case Western here today with a good showing of students. This is just a tiny little sample of the schools that will be coming to Stevenson. We have usually between over 100 to 150 schools that come in. My schedule looks a little crazy from just after Labor Day until the middle of October right now, and they're still calling and emailing us. Students can see this list in Naviance. There is no parent separate login for Naviance. We do encourage you to log in with your students. This is also available on the school's website. We have a Google Doc that you see live. So as Caroline Hilly, our amazing assistant in the back, is adding in schools, you see it live on who's coming in. Students do need to register for these visits, and if they come to us and they aren't registered, there is a chance that we will send them away. And we do this not to be mean, but because of space limitations. Like, for instance, today, Case Western, last year we had to have them in here because we had 70, 80 students. Today we only had 50, so we were able to keep them in the CCC. And I joke, once we get beyond 60 in the College Career Center, it gets a little squishy and smelly in there. So we need to know what spaces we have to have reserved. So we do encourage and require, I should say, that students need to register at least 2 days in advance in Naviance. And they also need to communicate with their teachers and make sure that it's a good time for them to miss. If at any point they're like, no, maybe this is not a good day for me to miss, that's okay. We update the notes in Naviance of every college that comes. And we also try to hang on to at least 1 or 2 handouts for a week that they provide. So students have access to that too. So when they go into Naviance, they are able to see the whole list of schools that we have. And again, they register 2 days in advance. Most of our visits are in the CCC unless we have space issues like U of I. We actually exceeded this space last year because students didn't register in advance. And so we had to turn away kids because we weren't anticipating such a large group. And all they do is they go in and they simply click that button on the right that says register, and that's all they have to do. And it will tell them where that location is going to be as well. So we definitely want them in there to do that. The number one thing I get from students who don't register is I don't know how to log in, or I'm having issues logging in. I did some sleuthing last year and I asked some kids, show me how you're logging in. And what I figured out they were doing is what our kids do. They went to Google and they put Naviance login. And what came up was actually the administrator's My Portal. And it wouldn't let them log in, and they weren't getting I forgot my password links because they're not an administrator. So they really need to go either to our school's website to grab the accurate link, or again in that Canvas app that we invited them to for the CCC to get it to register. And there is an I forgot my password link that they can go to, but their login is the same as the Stevenson login, their email and their password. So definitely have them sit down. I have a junior and a senior here myself, so we sat down and started talking about, well, what reps might be good ones for you to come to. Okay, so we're now gonna go super deep into the 4-year application process in this. General tips that we gave them, and if they haven't done this yet, this is a great thing to go home and ensure for your students. Number one, we want them to review their transcript. On rare occasions, there can be errors that happen. One of the things that we had caught is one of the summer school class sections, the grades didn't come over. And so we had to go in and manually get things changed. Sometimes those things happen. So we always want to make sure before students are sending anything off, or teachers and counselors are, that everything is accurate. They can go into IC, you can go into IC and then take a look at their grades on their transcript under that reports and see what it looks like. And some of them are kind of debating this GPA waiver thing. We want those in as soon as possible, honestly, last week. So if they're still debating it, let's get it in this week, just to make sure that their GPA is the way they were expecting it to be when that transcript gets uploaded. Traditionally, we do not send a transcript until after Labor Day. That gives us another week or so to make sure everything is cleaned up and accurate. I know for some of these schools, there's some rolling admission schools out there, like in Iowa or like a Kansas. Those schools really aren't reviewing anything until September as well. There's zero benefit in sending an admissions off or an application off this week versus the middle of September, even late September. All schools are treating students equally up until October 15th. That's the point where we start to see those deadlines kind of happen. So go home this week, make sure that your students have reviewed their transcript and IC and they feel like it looks good. And if they're doing GPA waivers, get those in. We told them also to be working with a non-SHS email account because their Stevenson account will get deactivated after high school. So whatever thing they're doing after high school and whoever they're interacting with, we want to make sure they have an account that they continue with. If they've already started an account in Common App with their D125 email, they can go into the settings and add in a different email. At some point, and I have a 22-year-old as well, and we've been working in this because he didn't do it when I told him to do it, but you want to make sure that College Board and ACT also gets that other email account going too if it's with a D125, because then they can't get back in. So make sure that they're switching things over. And maybe it's a fresh account, right? I know some of our students have fun things like Justin Bieber Lover 09 at yahoo.com, right? We want something a little more forward-facing, a little more appropriate. And then these last few steps are really what, if I had the manpower, I would love to do, is to sit down with every one of my students and look at their lists. We can't do that just with the volume of families that we work with, but we're trying to teach our students and our families how to do this. At this point, we're really hoping that our students have a defined, reasonable list of schools that deserve their time and your money and energy in the process, right? And we talk about in the fall and last spring, we talked about these three categories of schools that we want you to put these schools into, these three buckets, right? We've got safety schools. Schools we'd be stunned they wouldn't be admitted, and you're using those Navient scattergrams we showed you to gauge that, and maybe the cost is under. And then we've got schools where we anticipate an admission. Again, if you look at the Navient scattergrams, pretty much running in that green group, and that cost feels okay. And then there's schools that maybe we're unsure. Maybe you fall a little below the criteria. Maybe the cost is a little high, and you have to see how that financial aid package shakes out. I was just having that conversation with my junior daughter today about a school. I'm like, this is really expensive. We have to see how it looks. And the goal really is to have about 5 to 10 colleges total across all three categories. I know we're in the land where students are really kind of sprinkling in more of those highly selectives. I definitely hear in my office the idea of, well, the more I apply to, the more likely I am to get into one of them, which I get why that thought process happens, but statistically that's actually faulty thinking. And what we see is the less likely you are to do your applications well, which then lowers your ability to get in because you're not taking the time on the essays, you're not personalizing those applications, and the colleges can tell. And they're looking for students that really has a vested interest in them. So I tell my students at most 15. Every year we see students go deeper. Last year, I think I had a couple students that were in the 40s. I definitely saw denials at schools that I would have thought admitted to, but because again, they weren't hitting the deadlines they should have been hitting, they weren't doing the essays the way they should have been, it became really hard to keep up with everything. So again, we kind of want to keep it to a reasonable number. We want them to find some sort of an organizational system. We gave them one as a sample electronically in paper. Continue to learn about colleges, and I really think we should change this last bullet to unsubscribe from the schools you don't have interested in. I know they're getting emails a ton every day. My own daughter, I'm like, just unsubscribe from these schools. Let's make sure you're getting the mailing list from the ones that you are interested in. There are several different admissions plans. For those of us that did go to school in the United States, this has changed a lot from when we went. I don't even think early decision was an option when I went to college back in the 90s. This is a big plan, and it requires a signature from the student, from the families, and from the counselor that everyone is in agreement and understand what this plan means. This is a binding agreement up front. Not every college offers this. Northwestern would be a local example of a school that does. And what the student is saying by using this early decision plan is, if you admit me, I promise I'm going to attend. I will cancel all my other applications. I don't get to find out where else I got in. I don't get to compare financial aid offers. I'm committing to your school up front. There are definitely benefits to this. It enhances admission. Some of these pools are bringing in 50, 60% of their freshman class through early decision rounds. They usually have a higher percent admit rate than they do in regular or later rounds, but there are definitely drawbacks to it as well. So schools are expecting for families to go in to those websites and use that net price calculator that we talked about to understand the costs of that as well. Restrictive early action is a very weird plan. Only a handful of schools use this. The ones that tend to use it would be some of the Ivy League. Stanford, Notre Dame is probably the closest one that uses it. And this is a bizarre plan, and every school kind of has their own caveat to it. But generally what they say is that if you apply to Harvard, REA, or single action, you cannot use an early decision plan anywhere else. So ED is not an option then. And you can only apply early action, which I'll talk about in a minute, to public schools or schools that have merit-based scholarship money or a special program tied to that round. If they don't, then you have to go regular. So an example of this would be if you apply to Harvard REA, you can't ED to Northwestern. You could use an early action round at University of Southern California. It's a private school with scholarship money tied to that round. But you could not apply early action to MIT. They don't have any scholarship money tied to that round. It's a little confusing. So if your student is dabbling in this round and you need clarification, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Early action is what students really should be using, especially at public schools. This is where schools have the most amount of spots. U of I will tell you 80% of their seats are given out to early action students. Everyone should be applying early action to U of I. Nobody should be doing regular. Early action is also where scholarship money is usually tied at those public schools. Regular is really only used, we would recommend, for schools that you're not using an ED and they only offer regular as the other option. So Northwestern has an ED and a regular. So we would tell students, well, you would use the regular then if you're not using ED. And then rolling is like Iowa or Kansas, where in a few weeks you find out your decision and they kind of roll out decisions. So they're usually for schools that are a little more open enrollment and not as selective. The deadlines are confusing, as maybe some of you guys are noticing, and this is where we try to help our students. You're going to find some deadlines are October 15th, some are November 1st, some are November 15th, there's December 1st, there's January, there's February, they're all over. So we try to really simplify this down into two heavily recommended deadlines. There's no penalty for students if they miss them, but if they do abide by our recommendations, it gets them out of the window of what we call kind of the crazy window. Because as you can imagine, everyone's using Common App. I imagine most of you have actually probably heard this word now prior to tonight. And across the world, there's 1,100 schools and students across the world all trying to submit in that last week of the deadline, right before November 1st, where a lot of those deadlines are. That system crashes every year. It just can't handle the volume. So we try to work our students about 2 weeks ahead of the window. So we tell them, go ahead and apply, but try to get everything that you have control over in by October 15th for any public school or anything that has early in the plan. And that was 3 of those plans: early decision, early action, and that restrictive early action. Again, best chances for admission. It's going to work them out of that window. And what's going to happen is you guys are starting to notice when your student hits submit, they get a confetti, congratulations, and then they get an email from the school that says, okay, now you have to create a portal at our university, and that's actually where you see the decisions. There may be additional pieces for them to do. It's where you see financial aid packages, all within the school portal. So once they submit in Common App, they're kind of done with Common App. They'll never go back into it again. So we definitely recommend trying to work on that 2 week ahead window. All parts they have control over should be submitted. The counselors and the teachers, and we'll get into more of this, really have all the way up until the deadline. They are managing dozens and dozens, if not more, students that they're writing for on their own evenings time and their weekends and their evenings with their families. And all of them have November 1st deadlines. So they're working kind of in first with the kids with the earliest deadline, and their system doesn't crash. Students can submit before those pieces are submitted. Everything meets together in cyberspace together. The second deadline is for anything left over, and honestly, there's not much. It's schools that they're using a plan for a private institution. And a lot of times students will say, well, that's really a January 1st deadline. It could be a January 1st, January 15th, somewhere in there. But we really believe by the end of November, this is kind of like a mindset. They turn that page into December. We want them done with the 4-year application process. We want them to truly be able to spend the time over December to make sure their grades are where they want them to be, because some schools may ask for those grades. And we also want to make sure they can unplug over winter break. And we also know that nobody's really here over winter break. So if they run into a problem in submission on December 31st, we're not really checking our email at that point. So if hopefully they can get it done by the end of November, they'll be in a good place to really just sit back and enjoy the rest of their senior year. If they are applying to those community colleges like CLC or Harper or any of the other ones, we would recommend to actually wait until second semester to apply, just because if they're applying right now, CLC and Harper are gearing up for spring classes. So waiting until second semester like January, February is the best time for that. Application options. It's funny, as I spent 20 years now in this role, I can remember when Common App had like 200 schools, and now they have 1,100. Really what probably 99.9% of our students are using is Common App. Every now and then I'll run into a student who's a one and doneer. You know, my family and I know I'm going to this one school. We know we can afford it. I know I'm getting in. That's all I'm going to. They have their own application. I'm not going to mess with Common App. Great, it's fine. Sometimes it's Iowa. A very straight, simple app on the site. But really, most students are using Common App. Coalition App has come and gone. If you've had older students, there were some schools that we were called Coalition exclusive. That's no longer the case. A lot of schools have left Coalition because it's a clunky, not fun app. The only reason why I know a student uses Coalition, and our counselors all know it too, and I asked them randomly in the presentation, they all, without prompting, could say, that's because my student went over 20 applications, because Common App caps you at 20 applications. So my hope is that none of our students are going over 20 and needing to go into Coalition. We hope that they're all kind of staying within there. And then QuestBridge is a unique application system. Last year we had a lot of traction for that, and we wanted to make sure that families were really clear on who makes a great QuestBridge applicant, because that timeline is actually much earlier than any of the timelines I've spoke about. There's a matching system involved in there. QuestBridge is designed for students that are super, super high achieving. So that would be students with really strong rigor in their transcript and really strong grades to go with that rigor. But the family also has high financial need. And a good indicator would that be like maybe if your student qualified for free and reduced lunch. So if students meet both those criteria, QuestBridge might be a great system for them to look at and use. Otherwise, it's probably not appropriate, and it's going to stress them out a little bit more because it moves all the deadlines up by at least a month. So we definitely want students to look at QuestBridge if it's appropriate, but we wanted to make sure families understood that that's a very unique system. And there's no preferences on any of those systems if colleges often offer multiple ways. College application process for tips. This seems like the craziest tip, and I'll show you where it is, but I don't know how many times I sit down with students and say, I don't know, let's look on the website. So they really should go to each college's website and take a look at what does it take for my application to be complete. And I'm going to show you examples of that in the next screen. The other piece is we need to make sure they're using their legal name. This can happen, and I see it on my back end, is that they could have a preferred name that they've always gone by. Maybe they go by Bobby, but their name is Robert, whatever it might be. And they're applying as Bobby, but all of their legal stuff, the FAFSA, their transcript, all says Robert. It doesn't match in the admissions office, and they wind up with 2 half-completed files that never get connected for a decision by that deadline. So we want to make sure they're using legal name, whatever's on the passport, the birth certificate, Social Security card, That's what they should be using. There is a preferred name option in all of these systems. We want to make sure that things match. These are 3 examples of going to the school's websites, pulling up undergraduate freshman admissions checklists. Ohio State is on the left. And this area right here, I want to show you guys, and maybe it's hard to see it if you're zooming in. The word official in front of ACT or SAT is a really big deal. I'm going to go to that in a few slides. So note that they use the word official in front of that. But Ohio State says they want transcripts, official ACT or SAT, an optional recommender from a teacher or a counselor, maximum of 2 letters. They don't want a bunch. Please don't have your students asking for a bunch. And then we'll talk about that English if you're not a native language speaker in a little bit. Wisconsin wants the application, a fee, 2 essays. They're going to require kids to self-report their grades. We'll talk about that in a minute. 1 required letter of recommendation. And again, if you're not an English language speaker, a native, we'll talk about that. Illinois State, way more simple. They're going to have the students say what courses they've completed. Again, that's self-reporting. They want their GPA average. And they want test scores if they decide to submit them, and an optional personal statement. That's all they need. So this really is like the thing. Students will come to me and say, do I need a letter of rec? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What schools are you applying to? Let's go to the checklist and let's see what they want. Sending transcripts, this is where things have gotten confusing, where we've actually had to create a flow chart for families and students to understand how colleges want their grades. You would think it would be as simple as, we send off your grades and they got it. But every college can ask for their own way of getting grades. Some want them in their own system because it saves manpower for them of having to get them in the system that they're reading in. Others only want them officially through a transcript. So we kind of created this flow chart for students to kind of understand. So we start with, did the school ask you to self-report it? And you kind of saw on that previous screen how like Madison and Illinois State kind of used that word, self-reporting or share with us. If the answer is yes, the student and you, we'll talk about that too, did the hard work by putting everything in, and that's how the grades are going. At the end, they'll send a final transcript and they double check that everything matches. Students are usually pretty accurate because otherwise they get revoked. So we definitely don't want that to happen. If the answer is no, then the next question we have the students ask themselves, am I using the Common App or the Coalition app? And 99.9% of the time, the answer is yes. Their counselor is going to automatically upload their transcript and school profile into Common App as soon as the students put their email address in there. And just after Labor Day is when the counselors start uploading all those. So they can thank their counselor because the counselor did the hard work. If the answer is no to both of those, which is pretty rare, they're going to need to use something called Parchment. Parchment is a website that they go to and they create an account. They connect it to the Stevenson in Lincolnshire. Some of our graduates did not connect it to the right Stevenson, and their final grades didn't go because they connected it with the one in Michigan. But then they simply request their final transcript to go or their transcript to go. Parchment is really not needed right now. It'll be used in the spring when they're sending their final transcript. Parchment is probably used right now for students that maybe are applying to schools out of the country, because that's kind of the official way we send things off. So let's talk a little more about this self-reported academic record called the STAR, sometimes called STARS, because every school that does the self-reported academic record, of course, uses a different system to get the grades from the students. Some schools, like Clemson, uses something called the STARS. U of I uses their own. You have to go into their portal. Madison will take it off a Common App. So you guys can kind of see how it starts to get hard to manage all these apps and how things are going. So whatever system they're using, students will need to go line by line and enter in every class that they took and the grade that they received. This is a great place for a parent or a guardian's eye. I joked with the kids, again, mama 3, junior, senior, and a 22-year-old. Some of us parents have anxious energy. I'm one of them. And we would be so thrilled to know that they were working on their college apps and asked me to come and help and overlook something that, gosh, I might get off of them and nagging about their college apps for like a week and take them out to Starbucks, right? So this is a great place for you guys to sit down. They can pull a transcript right from Infinite Campus, as we talked about in the beginning, to go line by line to make sure it's accurate. We are on a weighted 4.0 scale. This is probably the most debated question that we get every year in my 20-some years of doing this role. Students have a hard time understanding that you can have above a 4.0 on a 4.0 weighted scale. I keep talking about the weighted is what gives them that extra credit. It's like back in first grade when they got 108% of that spelling test, right? You can have above a 4.0, even though we're giving 5.0 weights on AP, that's the weighted part of the 4.0. We're based on a 4.0. Test optional. So let's talk about testing for a few minutes in here. We still have that question of, should I apply test optional? And most schools out there are actually still test optional. I know we're kind of hearing a little more of the turning of the tide a little bit, but it's only, I don't know, maybe like 50 schools now that are requiring tests. The newest one to flip kind of late, I thought, in the game was Ohio State. Everybody in Illinois is still test optional. So the question is, you need to check your school. Do they allow for you to be test optional? Are there any implications for scholarship or special programs? And then we're given the same advice, which is look at the school's mid 50%. They will say 50% of our admitted students who sent test scores fell within this window of a range. If the student falls within that 50% or above it, that's when we would say they should probably send their test score. If they fall in that bottom quartile, that's when we would say, maybe it's a little better to go test optional. Just know that they're going to lean a little heavier on your transcript and hopefully that junior year transcript is solid for them. And it kind of depends on how close they are to that bottom number. We try to remind families that some of these schools are now at like 60, 70% of the students are test optional. So try not to stress about that window too much. Go back to 2019 rates to Google that to see what that true window really is. But that really is the best advice. No student is ever pitted against another student of similar GPA and rigor on their transcript. Say, well, this one had a test score, this one didn't, so we're going to admit the one with the test score. Admission is way more holistic than that, and the test scores have always been one of the lower things for them. And then some of our schools are test-free or test-blind. All of those California public schools are still in that at NIU. Fair Test is a great website resource to go to kind of have a one-stop shop of what are the current rules for everybody. And then the English proficiency exam. So many schools will have this requirement that students need to be in an English-speaking country and an English-speaking school for 3 years, for the past 3 years, and then they're fine. If they've not been in an English-speaking country, in an English-speaking school for 3 years, then they're going to require probably an English proficiency test. And that could be the IELTS, the Duolingo, the TOEFL. The schools decide what they will take. They will not take the access testing that we do here. There's usually a score that they're looking for, and it does need to be done relatively quickly within that admissions time frame. So students need to kind of go and look at each one of those schools. Sometimes they will allow an SAT or an ACT score in lieu of that, but again, the school makes a decision on that, so students have to look individually. Reporting test scores. This is a part that I love this momentum a handful of years ago because there was such an expense that we all saw for students to report test scores. It was like, I don't know, $12 per school per score. It started adding up really quickly. So colleges decided, many of them, that they would allow students to self-report their test scores, meaning either in Common App or they may require to do it in their own portal. Students could go in and list their ACT and SAT scores, and colleges would believe them. And what would happen is, at the end, if the student committed to that school, they then would send one official report to that school with those scores verifying that. And that was great. And if there was a discrepancy, that's when it wasn't great, right? So students knew not to be inaccurate with that. So students can look to see if it's self-reported. But as you kind of saw in that few slides ago, I pointed out that official in front of Ohio State for ACT and SAT. This zings our students every year, and I try to be so clear on it because I see the heartbreak that happens with a student who misses this. Official means they won't let them self-report it. It means that that school is requiring for it to go directly from the testing agency to the school itself through an electronic file that students have to go in and request and pay money for with a credit card. We live in a land of Amazon where I can order something tonight and it will appear at my door tomorrow morning. Test scores don't fly that fast. They take 2 to 3 weeks. You can't rush order them either. It doesn't help, even though they'll gladly take your money for it. Some of these schools, like Ohio State, is a receive by deadline. So if students aren't ordering their test scores by October 1st for those official scores, they may miss a deadline that then has lasting impact with scholarship money. And I've seen that. Students miss, $20,000 times 4 because they didn't send those official test scores in time to meet the deadline. So I've told my students, and I know Mr. Yurkan said it as well, they should be going home as soon as possible and looking to see what schools require official test scores and sending those right now. Make sure they get there. Don't wait, because it's an easy thing to forget to do until the last minute, and then you're sweating, did it get there in time of that deadline? There are a couple of upcoming test dates. I'm hearing students take this October 18th ACT. It is getting tight, right? If we're looking at a November 1st, this might be a kid where I would say maybe don't hit that October 15th deadline, see that test score if that's what's making you decide to go test optional. They should hopefully get that test in time, but they'll have to check with the schools to see, should I submit and then I can update my file with the score, or do I need to wait to submit to have that score because they won't consider it otherwise. FERPA is a screen that maybe some of you might have helped with, because when students get into Common App, they get this like threatening message with these multiple screens that are like irrevocable decision, and they get a little freaked out. So we gave a slide for it. FERPA is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. We've all kind of used to this as adults, but essentially they need to decide to waive or not waive the right to see the things that are being sent on their behalf. I think our students get excited, as I would too, if I have letters of recommendation and maybe I don't want to waive my right, and then it's like the letter will pop up on my screen and I get to see it. It isn't the way that it works, as you guys know. There's a very formal legal process to actually request the file of review, and it can't happen for like a year until you attend that school if they haven't destroyed it. Our recommendation is that students waive the right because it shows schools are not afraid of anything that might be sent on their behalf. It truly is the decision up to them and you. But we just want to make sure that we kind of brought attention to it, because once they do it, they can't change the decision, especially if somebody has submitted. Once the submission happens, there isn't any changing this. So we want to make sure that they were aware and you were aware of what that purpose screen means. Letters of rec is something we've talked to them a lot about. And in the spring, when we saw them in April, we brought college reps in that actually talked a lot about this too. Because I think the tendency happens that they go out and ask a ton of people to write letters for them. We see this every year. They get excited about it and they think, oh, all these people can say these really cool things about me. And the admissions people are very real. They're human beings with lives and families, and they're reading over 1,000 files in a very short amount of time. So we did a little math game with them and thought about, okay, if an admissions rep is reading 1,000 files from November to March, and every student submits 5 letters of rec, how many letters of rec are they reading alone? Do the number, and that's a lot. It doesn't even include any of the other parts. So colleges really want students to adhere to the minimum. The other thing that we can see is that our teachers have limits. They can't write unlimitedly. I don't think that's a word, but I made it up. Essentially, they can write for so many students well, and then they have to say, gosh, I'm so sorry, I just don't have the capacity. And every year, I only have 1 or 2 students this happens to, but they come to me and saying, all of my teachers have said no, because they can't write, or I kind of asked a little late in the game. So we want to make sure our students aren't over asking, so our teachers have the ability to write for everybody that needs one, and that those letters are being read too. So that's why we always direct them back to those websites, because they're very clear on what they want. And if they don't list a letter, that means they're not using that in the admissions review. Typically, a college, if they want it, only wants 1 to 2. It's really from a core academic area. So core would be English, math, science, social studies, and world language. Engineering, business, art, those are all considered others. Those are electives. A sponsor, an employer. I had someone talk to me about a college professor. Those would also be an other. Schools may allow for an other, but that's not usually what they're looking for. Teachers have a reflection sheet that the students were emailed. It's on their Canvas app, and we have hard copies we gave them, and it's in the CCC. that they would fill out and then ask the teacher to write, giving them the deadlines of that information. Counselors, I think sometimes students just think counselors automatically write. They don't. They will automatically upload transcripts, but they do not automatically write. There is a QR code that they had access to that they would scan and fill it out, and then they have to make an appointment because not every school wants a counselor letter that's separate than a teacher letter. So the counselors want to sit down and do like a little interview and really make sure they're getting all the important parts out for them if they need a letter. We told them to give them at least 3 weeks notice. In my world, I know my own kids, they don't remember dates very well, that seem random. So I always tell students before homecoming week, don't enjoy a single activity during homecoming week until all your letters are back in place. That's about a month. So that's a good place to kind of help them remember that. Essays and personal statements. I'm going to stop for a moment. This is the hazard now of presenting all by myself. I need a sip of water. Hold on. Okay, I got my voice back. We could spend a whole week on this topic, or several hours. Some of your students did take a class this week. We tried to hit the big tips for them. Optional really isn't optional, with the exception of a few things that I'll go over. But if a student's giving you an optional personal essay to write, you probably should write it. It shows that you actually have some genuine interest. Answer the prompt seems like such a silly thing to put up there, but the essays that I've read, what I often see is that students are trying to shove in so many things in the essay that they think colleges want to hear. They actually aren't writing to the prompt. Have someone proofread. I joke, I get this every year. They're going to college, not collage. High school's 2 words, not 1. I don't know if they're trying to keep the count low for that, but I catch that all the time too. We had a great story we told them about a kid who loved to go hunt pheasants with his grandfather, but the kid forgot the H in pheasants. Not a great essay either. Peasants is not something you want to hunt. So you want people checking those things. It really needs to be their voice shining through. Quality is better than quantity, but I think most of our students struggle to stay within the word limit because a lot of those word limits are short and cute. They obviously need to give time for the process. You all know that. That's what we're nagging them about, right? And we definitely caution AI. I have been all over the board with AI, to be honest. I'm very transparent about everything I can be with my students and families. I think it's a great brainstormer idea. Give me some ideas or topics or something in there. They need to do their own writing. Colleges want to see it. AI really does lose the personalization in their voice, which is what they love to read about. At one point, I was suggesting you're 100 words over, pop it into AI and ask it to find your redundancies and help you condense it. But then I've been told that these free versions that are out there, it can store it in the cloud. And so if anything gets fact checked or AI checked, it's now going to be flagged. So I'm a little more worried about that. So I just really tell students they shouldn't be using it much unless maybe they're trying to brainstorm some ideas. We do have some essay writing workshops that we're offering. The ILC and ELC are amazing. They're actually offering a brainstorming one in the evenings coming up. So look at the Daily Digest, that'll be in there as well. The type of essays they're gonna run into, and again, this is why it's so hard to apply to so many schools well. The why us essay is, why are you wanting to apply to University of Wisconsin-Madison? You need to be very specific. It needs to be something deeper than I've been a Badger fan since the age of 3. That's not what they want. They want to know, what are the club's activities that you're going to join? What are you going to be a part of? What are you excited about to do when you're on your campus? That's really important. Why this major is making sure that they're actually interested in the major that they're looking to study, kind of vetting that. And, U of I has condensed their essay to 150 words because they don't want them talking about Legos from when they were 4. And that's why they want to be an engineer. They want relevant, current information. Additional information is truly that optional section. So maybe they've had a hiccup on their transcript, a weird grade or a weird semester. They have an IEP or a 504. This is a great place to really kind of talk about that. And it's really a direct essay. And then these weird analytical questions that are out there. What I really tell students in the runs that I've read so far, this has been the feedback that we tend to give, is that they kind of violate what we call this 1/3, 2/3 rule. And the way I explained it to my seniors is I said, students really like to talk about the thing. right? Whatever the thing is, the event, the person, whatever it is. They'll spend 600 of the 650 words talking about the thing, the color of the thing, the smell of the thing, all the things. They have great detail. And then we get to who are you because of the thing, and it's like 2 sentences at the end. 2/3 of the essay should be who they are because of it. 1/3 is about the thing. So if I gave them an example, I would say, let's say you're writing about your grandmother, the most influential person in your life, and you spend the whole essay gushing about how amazing your grandmother's cookies are and all the things that she's done for you, who she is. They're going to want to admit your grandmother. They want to admit you. So they need to know, who are you because she was in your life? How do you operate differently in this world with your friends, your siblings, your parents, to strangers? That's what they're looking for. They want to admit good roommates. They want to admit good classmates. They want to admit to people who are going out and doing things and contributing to the campus culture. Common App, right turn. Okay, so I think you guys probably know most of your students are in Common App. We gave you that Common App tip sheet. I know Ms. Hille's put it in the chat. Students should immediately go in there and select their schools and their admissions plans they're using. This is another error that I've seen over the years that causes a lot of stress. And I use counselors as an example because students throw the schools in there and they're busy doing things in there, but they never put the plan they're using. Their recommenders in their portal, they see a list of everyone who they're writing for by deadline. So on October 31st, and this is a common conversation I hear with the counselors, I'm up with them. Okay, everybody's done Common App. I don't think I have any more surprises. I have everyone written for, I'm good. They shut their computer down, they go home, they take their little kids out trick-or-treating, they come back the next morning on November 1st, open up their computer, and there's an poop because somebody added a November 1st deadline in the last minute, and now they gotta hurry up and write a letter in 2 hours that they didn't know they had to write. So we can't stress the importance enough for your students to go in, put the schools, and pick their deadlines or their admissions plans. So then their recommenders know who they're writing for when. We talked about this 4.0 weighted scale. We've already done a walkthrough on Common App from start to end. We'll do it again if students want to be a part of that on September 3rd, 8th period, but only if they have 8th period free. We can't take them out of class. The other big part of this that happens in Common App is once they get through that weird FERPA screen, they will go in and actually invite people to be part of their Common App party. So they will put their counselor's email in there. The other annoying thing that happens every year with Common App is that they do their best to put the email in there and they flip-flop an I and an E, they send off the email, and they don't get an undeliverable. They never know it didn't go. That person never got it, and there's this panic that usually happens a week before when we start to connect, things aren't getting done. So I always tell students, the moment you've put somebody's email address in here, whether it's a counselor or a teacher, they should immediately follow up with a Gmail email that says, hey, I invited you to my Common App. I just want to make sure you got that invite okay. And that smooths that out. Again, the counselor will automatically upload the transcript and the school profile. They will not automatically do a letter unless the student fills out that brag sheet and makes an appointment. And then the counselor, the teacher, there's one extra step they have to do. Counselor stuff goes everywhere. Common App's smart enough to know they have one counselor and all that stuff goes everywhere. But the teachers, they have to manage. So they have to assign the colleges which teacher is writing for which college, because maybe they invited 2 teachers, but one college only wants 1. So they have to go in and toggle between the drop-down menu of who's writing for what. And the teacher won't get that invite until they assign them. U of I, how many of you, your students are planning to apply to U of I? Yes, we had over 700 applications to U of I last year. So we've devoted a whole screen to it. They do allow students to self-report their test scores. They have an early action deadline, which means we want them done by October 15th. And then the annoying process for them is they do have to self-report their grades. And again, this is how it goes for U of I. They hit submit and Common App, confetti, psh, congratulations, thanks for applying. And then about 2 to 3 days later, they get an email from Illinois that says, it's now time to establish your Illini account. Please go in by this date and you must type in all of your grades and classes. This takes 20 to 30 minutes. We do have a walkthrough that I will create. It's out there, but not quite done. And the reason why it's not done is because the app doesn't go live to September 1st. So I got some plans on Labor Day that I'm going to do. But I'll finish that up for them and they'll have a walkthrough on it. The notification date is on there. Everybody should be using the early action deadline. I don't want any of our students using regular. They have way less chance getting in through regular. They really should be picking 2 majors in this process. There are 2 essay prompts for the first major. They pick a second major. There's 1 additional. We do a U of I insider tips where we'll talk more specifically about essays. I'll share a couple things just because I want to make sure our families know it. That first essay is 150 words, and it's something along the lines of elaborate on an experience in the past 2 to 3 years that sparked interest in this major. They want that, one experience. They do not want students to list 5 things. That's somewhere else in their app. They actually want them to talk deeply about the one thing, because they want to know they actually have a genuine interest and understanding in the major. The second essay is something along the lines of how will this major at UIUC help you with your overall career and personal goals? This is not a why UIUC question. It's only 150 words as well. They don't need to talk about why they love University of Illinois. They want to know what is the big picture thing for them. What kind of things to impact do they want to make in the community? They're not looking for, I want a job with great money and job security. They want to know the impact they're going to make. They're definitely looking for students that like to collaborate and communicate with each other. They don't want students who want to just go to U of I and work alone in their dorm room on their stuff. That needs to come out in those essays. Scholarships. Sometimes I feel like I give not great news with this, but again, I really believe in transparency in the process. There are ways to look at outside scholarship money. I try to temper the expectations a little bit about this because I think there's this urban legend out there. If you just spent a couple hours, you could find a full ride. I think that's true if you find a very niche scholarship that you qualify for. Your great uncle lost a thumb in World War II kind of thing. For the most part, outside scholarships, they're kind of all over in terms of deadlines. Students should look, but they're very competitive. There's a lot of factors to them, and I always tell students you need to put your spidey sense up a little bit about some of these. Some of these feel a little scammy, like what are you including in this and where is it going? Are you going on a mass spamming mailing list? They're only asking you for your email address and a GPA and nothing else. So, kind of help them vet, but there are some databases out there will have all of these outside scholarships in them, like FastWeb and Adlai. Naviance, we put things in. We try to put things in the Daily Digest that are more honed in. Specific major, student from Lake County, those kind of things that are a little more vetted and a little more specific. And then we do encourage students and families to check into their own community. That's a great way to look for scholarships. The foundation scholarships I'll go into in the next slide. And then students really should be researching schools. The biggest amount of money really does tend to come from the institution itself. They're going to give you an amount, and that amount is usually renewable over 4 years. The outside scholarships tend to be a little smaller, and they don't tend to be renewable. So again, I'm not saying don't look for them, but I think, if the hope is that you're going to be able to just spend some time on those outside scholarships and it's going to result in a lot of money, we've not tend to see that to be true. So we want to kind of just temper those expectations a little bit. And then we emailed them out about the Wells for Indiana, Jefferson for UVA, and then Pearson for University of Toronto. So those are out there for them to look at too. This foundation, which is separate than Stevenson, they have over $70,000 scholarships that they offer. These are scholarships earmarked just for Stevenson students that are given to us by businesses, organizations, foundations that are set up. Those will come out in January. They'll be, I think, emailed out to you, and then students use an app called Kaleidoscope to go in, and they can apply to whichever ones apply to them. So definitely keep your ear out for that for January. Okay, let's talk about the timeline in here. So we talked about students, like, how do you see us? Like, where do you see us? And like we said, Mr. Mill and I, there's 2 of us for the entire senior class, so sometimes it's kind of hard to get these individual moments with us. So one of the things that we start tomorrow is something called Drop-In Tuesdays. Before school in 8th period, we are in the CCC 1123 with a little army of people there to help. Bring in your iPad, you got the questions, let's sit down, let's figure out how to help you. The only thing we won't do in that space, though, is essay reads. We want individual time for that. We do have a mandatory early decision session. Sounds scary, but we want to make sure students really understand what that means because the counselors have to sign off on that. There are 8 different times. I've asked the students to stop getting me in trouble because I tell them every year, you cannot miss a class to come to this, and you cannot miss your F&P responsibilities. But there are 8 times. Just bring your lunch. It's a 15-minute quick session. Just come on in. So please make sure if they're doing one of those that they come to one of those. We have our own essay writing workshops that are more brainstorming. We have a Common App workshop left. We'll do those insider tips for the UIUC. I'll do a walkthrough on the California app in September, so if any of your students are applying to the public schools in California. And then we also bring in an interview panel. Interviews are getting a little more and more rare, to be honest. I think we see them kind of dwindling down for equity reasons. But if your student is at a school where they get that opportunity, we actually bring in people who do interviewing, and we'll talk about that. How to meet with us. For essay reads, we do them. I have a Calendly link. Mr. Miller does as well, and Mr. Yurkon's subbing and doing those. We have a couple rules with them. One, they cannot miss class, even if you call them out. I get in trouble. If they're in school, they have to be in class. So they can only come to us during free times. We can book up. So the ILC, ELC, even their own counselors and the English teachers often are willing to read. So we remind them of that. We're not the only humans that can read. And then we also have a limit of appointments. So students can make multiple appointments with us, but not at the same time. They can make an appointment, have the appointment, walk out of our office and make another one. But they can't do what some of them like to do, is I want to meet with you every Friday at 7:45. It's not fair. So we let them make one, come in, have it, and then they can make another one. General questions are really best in our drop-in Tuesday hours. And then we do have open office hours. This is a little confusing, but it's different. Like drop-in Tuesdays is like massive amounts of students hanging out, asking questions, a lot of fun going on in there. Open office hours is they see me individually in my office. So I'm in 6064, Mr. Miller, Mr. Yurkon are up in that green team. We are sitting there before school in 8th period, again, if they don't have class, to come in individually. We do tend to read essays during that time. I tend to only read one if there's a line. Send the student back out, see the next kid. If they want to hang out, there's only one other kid. We can rotate. But that is an option during those times too. And then many of you have done this post-secondary scope meeting. We started these back in November of last year, went all the way through the middle of June, and I've already done 5 or 6 so far this year. So these meetings are really designed for families that need help with a list. Like, I don't even know where to start. We don't have a list of schools. We need some ideas. So there's a worksheet that should be completed, and we can email that to you. You can reach out. It's also on our website. It's probably in the CCC Canvas app that you would complete with the student. And honestly, for us, the more that you complete, the better my list is back to you. If it's very vague, like any school, any size, anywhere in the country, we're undecided on major, kind of makes it hard for me to give you a good concrete list at this point, but we do our best. So if you would like that meeting, we are still offering spots for those. But again, it's really for a list, and we only can offer one per family. So if you had one, we can't do another one, but we can find a different way to connect. Oh, let me turn this around. Okay. So this is a timeline that you guys kind of have in front of you. Some big nights kind of coming up. The NCAA evening is coming up at Lake Zurich. There's some college fairs in there. That FAFSA opens up on October 1st. For real this year, we're excited. We will do a financial aid night on October 6th. Ms. Hilly, is that right? Is it the 5th or the 6th? Will you double check that for me? Because now I'm like second guessing myself with that date. There's a Choices College Fair for students with IEPs and 504s at Lake Forest. We have a First Gen night on October 9th. That 15th is when we talk about those deadlines for public schools, anything with early in the plan. We do a FAFSA, an Illinois Alternative Aid workshop by appointment, which we'll go into more details about in the middle of October. We'll send emails about that. And there's another fair if you wanted it at CLC. We talked about the November 30th deadline, the foundation scholarships. There's a gap year fair. She's waving at me. What you got? Yes, it's the 6th. Okay, I shouldn't second guess myself. All right, good. It is at 6. Foundation scholarships gap year. We do a summer job fair, and then that Career Ready Trade Expo. And then May 1st is going to be before we know it. I have a senior. I'm like freaking out myself. And that's when they really have to make that commitment by, is May 1st by the school. Our website is very helpful for you guys. And then we hit this with our students too. This is a journey. It's a journey on every level. I've seen my own students go through this. I've learned a lot in the process. We tell students, don't wait to apply. Electronic does not mean instant, which is harder and harder to understand every year. These are humans that are processing this thing on the college side. They get backlogged, delayed, because they have so much coming in to update their portals. They get sick. So things slow down in this process. Explore adulting. This journey is so much about your students being ready to fly the nest. In fact, there's a thing out there called soiling the nest. If anybody's heard about this, where it's a fun year where sometimes you're ready for them to leave because they're fighting with you so much. But, you know, I told my own kids, like, nobody's waking you up for an 8 a.m. class next year. Like, you need to figure out the alarm. I shouldn't have to be nudging you and saying, hey, your alarm went off 6 times. Like, you got to get up. They need to figure out laundry this year. They don't want their white clothes to turn pink. Some basic cooking things. And I sometimes challenge us parents, too. We use these pronouns like we a lot. We're sitting for the ACT next week. You're not taking the ACT, right? We're applying to college. No, they are, and they should be doing the work. It's really hard as a parent. Sometimes you're like, there's so much going on. They have so much on their plate. I'm just going to sit down and fill out Common App. And I can tell that happens because I get the emails from the parents. And when I actually connect with the kid knows all the answers. They know what they're doing. So give them a time to kind of spread their wings and start to do more of this on their own. They're ready, and they'll grow in the year in the process. It is such an honor to be part of the journey with them. You know, we start with them junior year, and to see them at graduation practice is the coolest thing. All of them so excited and ready to head off and to be done. So that is it for me. We are on the social media platforms. Our YouTube is really what we use the most. And that Canvas page for them, I think you guys can follow it. I don't understand how that works, even as a parent. With kids here, I don't understand this follow thing. But you might be able to do that. But they should be on it, too. And that's a great first step. So thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. And then I know Ms. Haley will be shutting down the recording. But have a great night.